Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus. My name is Daniel Dopp, joined by Mike Clay. Fantasy Focus is presented by Geico. Insurance can be hard, Mike. That's why Geico makes it easy with a 24/7 claim service and on-the-go policy info in the app. It is easy to Geico. It is you and I today, hanging out, talking about everything that happened on Week 14. It's good to see your face. How you doing, man?
Yeah, it's good to see you as well. A lot to get into. Unfortunately, more injuries.
So many.
Like, it's the year is 2023, okay? Don't we have the technology to just stop injuries?
Turn injuries off.
Like, just have a button, like in Madden. Just shut off injuries. Because I'm tired of it. And it makes our job even harder as well, trying to figure this stuff out. But it stinks to watch some of these star players go down, especially someone like Justin Jefferson, just coming back from the injury and quickly leaves the game. So I've had enough of it.
I've had enough of it, too.
I'm about as mad about it as Patrick Mahomes was yesterday evening about NFL officiating, but I don't want to get fined. So
yes, that's fair.
I'll leave it there.
That's a good point.
I'll leave it there until later in the show.
Yeah, we'll dive into that a little bit. We're definitely going to talk about Patrick Mahomes, but you mentioned it. We have a bunch of other stuff we're getting into, but we're going to start with injuries because, again, it is sort of like the focal point of the week with the guys that we had get hurt. We got Justin Jefferson back for the first time in 2 months, Mike. He caught 2 catches before leaving the game with a chest injury. They actually took him to the hospital. They wanted to make sure there wasn't anything internal that was going on there. So right now, what we know about Justin Jefferson, came in, played a handful of snaps, caught 2 balls, left immediately. And right now, as it is, it sounds like he has avoided any serious injury, but Kevin O'Connell has not said what it is going to be as far as this week goes. Do you have him in the projection for Week 15
I do. I have him in the projections right now. And to be clear, I liked what I saw out of the gate. 13 snaps, 3 targets. I'll take that. It was a good start. We were wondering what the connection would look like between Josh Dobbs and Justin Jefferson, and that duo was off to a good start. Of course, Josh Dobbs might be done as a starter in Minnesota, which is another story. Of course, Nick Mullins stepped in there. And by the way, he looked fine, 9 of 13, 83 yards. So maybe he could hold down the fort and keep Jefferson afloat as a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. So we'll keep an eye on this one. For now, we're not sure if he's going to play in Week 15, and obviously we'll update later in the week if he goes.
Yeah, the only positive that I would say coming from this injury is the fact that it's not a re-aggravation of the hamstring that has been out with. It was something different, right? And so hopefully because of that, we find out it's not that serious. We're able to move on, and Justin Jefferson will be back for our fantasy lineups in Week 15. Not the only guy, though, there. Alexander Madison also went down with an ankle injury. This one's been a little bit tougher to figure out, Mike, because when I'm looking at stuff, I see that there's an ankle injury, but there's not a lot of updates right now as far as what he is looking like, not just for this week, but beyond. So right now, when he went out, Ty Chandler, the guy that came and filled in, if Alexander Madison misses any time this week or beyond, seems like Ty Chandler is going to be the guy.
Yeah, I think so. Kenny Njoku is there. They have Myles Gaston and Dwayne McBride on the practice squad. So one of those guys could be involved, but it would be Ty Chandler most likely as the lead back. We saw a little bit of that in this game, 56% of the snaps, 12 carries, 3 targets. A couple of weeks ago, we saw a little bit of upside from him, was over 100 yards, only had 14 touches in that game. However, this was a situation we were trying to avoid already with Alexander Madison and Ty Chandler, and we're probably going to do that even if Chandler's the lead guy. Now, he would be, he's a fine waiver ad, could be a flex option for you, but keep this in mind. The Vikings running backs as a whole, 29th in fantasy points. They only have 5 touchdowns. Only the Packers have fewer. They still have to play this week, so they could actually, the Vikings can end up last in running back touchdowns if A.J. Dillon perhaps finds the end zone tonight. Aaron Jones reportedly will not play in this game, so if he's in your lineup, make sure you have a fallback option there. But yeah, look, we'll add Chandler. Well, I'm probably going to rank him in the 25 to 30 range. Certainly not a lineup lock.
Yes, exactly. Unfortunate. This Vikings game was just tough. Josh Dobbs gets benched, like you said. The score was 3-0. They came away with a win.
What year did I say it was?
2023, and the score was 3-0 at the end of the game.
1923, you said? That's what year it is?
It 3-0 like watching that game.
What is going on? We had this offense was just soaring and getting better every year, and then all these rules to help the defenses, and everyone was complaining about that, and we're protecting the quarterbacks. Everything's built around offenses, and in the last couple of years, it's like the opposite. Defenses are taking over. Offense is going the wrong way. No one wants that. Well, no one wants that.
Defenders want that, but we don't want that. No one in fantasy wants that.
Okay, defenders play their game and then they go watch the games. I don't think they're I love this 3-0 game. This who is off this week?
Arizona and the Commanders?
Yes. I'm just any defender like Buda Baker. Okay. He's in Arizona. He was on a bye. I don't think he was sitting at home like, yes, great
this
stuff.
Is a great game.
Maybe he was. I don't know. Maybe they are into defense. Maybe they are. But I think we all love high scoring games in Madden or watching games or college football, whatever it is. We like scoring. it's going the wrong way. They got to fix this.
I did not love 3-0. It's going to be interesting to see what this Vikings team looks like with Nick Mullins under center. If he is going to be the guy, even we're not totally sure who the quarterback is going to be. So
I assume he will be. He didn't. It's not like he stepped in and was awful,
right?
And he was supposed to be the backup. He was on. I think he was on IR, the PUP list to open the season. Was out for about 8 weeks with an injury. But if not for Dobbs, if they didn't get Dobbs, if he went somewhere else, Mullins would have stepped in for.
Been the guy.
Once healthy, would have stepped in for Kirk Cousins.
All right, let's talk about another quarterback. Unfortunately, Justin Herbert. This one was tough. Broke a finger in this one. Ended up leaving the game. Easton Stick came in to be able to be the signal caller in this one. Mike, it sounds like we're not going to have Justin Herbert, at least for this next game, but potentially for the rest of the season.
Yeah, season's probably over for the Chargers after dropping this game against Denver. I believe they're, 5-8 now?
Yep.
So probably not going to make the playoffs. Herbert's hurt. Would not be shocked if he's out for the rest of the season. So big loss for them. Stepping in did Easton Stick, 13 of 24, 179 yards. He's been around for a while. 2019 he was drafted. He entered this game. You know how many pass attempts he had in his career coming into this game?
I'll say 95.
One.
Okay.
One pass attempt, and it was in 2020. So not great. Very inexperienced. Didn't look super sharp in this one. Had a few bad plays, but did have 179 yards. So honestly, we just want to keep Keenan Allen afloat mostly. I don't think we really care about anyone else. Maybe Josh Palmer as a flex. He could be back this week. I actually have him in the first round of projections for this week. I suspect Palmer might be back this week. So we'll keep an eye on that. Maybe if those two guys can stay afloat, we're happy. Otherwise, we're not touching Quentin Johnson or Jalen Guyton, who lost some work in this one, or Gerald Everett. Austin Eckler, obviously. We'll get to him later, I believe, or certainly this week we'll talk about him. Board bet. I had a board bet with Field.
Yeah, you did.
Talk about how to bounce back game. So that's good, but definitely a little nervous about the outlook of this offense without Justin Herbert.
And I just hate the idea that even though Justin Herbert has struggled, we both know that, right? It has not been Justin Herbert's
ups and downs for sure, yeah.
It sucks to lose a starting quarterback, period. I don't care if it's week 14. We're still got the fantasy playoffs ahead of us. Like, we're seeing so many backups come in and play, and it's not that I don't want those guys to get their own opportunities.
No, you don't.
But the game is just better with starting quarterbacks.
What did we just talk about? We want offense, right? You don't want those backups in there, right?
Exactly.
The state of quarterback is not great anyway. And then we have all these, at least at the bottom, the first 16 to 20 quarterbacks, if everyone's healthy, are fine, or great, or good. After that, it's not great.
Not great.
And now we have all these injuries.
Yep.
It's certainly the theme this year is quarterback injuries.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move ahead and we'll talk about some. Actually, you know what? Let's talk about one other quarterback injury that we have here. CJ Stroud, unfortunately, banged his head on the ground when he was getting sacked by Quinnen Williams, which looked like unfortunate just the way that it happened. Mike, this game for him was brutal. And I think I saw that you tweeted it. You were like, this feels like a throwaway game, right? Nico Collins got hurt in this one, and we'll talk about that too. Tank Dell is gone. He doesn't have his top tight end in Dalton Schultz. Yep. They're taking on the Jets. There were a lot of things stacked
against him. The weather was bad.
The weather was really
terrible.
tough.
Yeah.
So this felt like a throwaway game for CJ Stroud. It wasn't a great one. Hopefully, we'll find out. We're not sure yet as far as the concussion goes, but ideally, we're going to hope that we can have him next week taking on the Tennessee Titans. Just didn't feel good. I'm gonna throw this one out. I'm not gonna hold it against him.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons to be excited about him. I don't think this game is a reason to drop him in our rankings. Right? It was just terrible all around, and it happens sometimes. We've seen great quarterbacks have bad days and bad conditions with injuries around, all those kind of things. So not too worried about it. If he plays this week, he'll be ranked as a starter for me, mid-range QB1. If he's out, we're obviously going to have to downgrade the Houston offense quite a bit from, we know what we've seen in years past. Davis Mills did have 6 multiple touchdown passing games and multiple passing touchdown games last season. Yep. As far as backup quarterbacks go, you could certainly do a lot worse. So there's at least hope for some of these guys to hang on the fantasy radar. Of course, the main guy would be Nico Collins.
Yep.
As you just said. He might not play either because he went down with an injury.
Yeah, he left with a calf injury in the first quarter of the game. Only had 1 catch for 13 yards, 2.3 fantasy points. To not have both Tank Dell and Nico Collins for an entire game against the New York Jets defense was definitely leaving CJ Stroud short-handed. If there was someone that I was going to look at, Noah Brown was going to be the wide receiver that I was hopeful was going to step in. Didn't really see a whole lot there. It was just tough sledding in this one. So hopefully we get Nico Collins back for CJ Stroud, and they can both play for us in week 14.
Yeah, snap leaders at receiver with Collins going out. Woods had 38. Xavier Hutchinson, the rookie, had 38. Yep. Noah Brown, 35. John Mechie at 25. Brown and Mechie actually had 5 targets to tie for the team lead. It was 3 for Woods and 3 for Hutchinson. I agree. Noah Brown would be the priority here if Nico Collins is out. Number 2, I guess, is Robert Woods. But, I mean, the other guys, I don't know if I would have messed with him. That's kind of a lottery between the other 3. And that'll also depend on if C.J. Stroud plays. If he's out, you could pick maybe Noah Brown if you want to throw him in your flex. But I think this offense might be safely ignored if Collins is out and C.J. Stroud's out.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, this is part of what's tough right now, right? Because we're going into week 15, fantasy playoff time. And now that rookie quarterback that a lot of fantasy managers may have been using, we might have to look and see whether or not we got to make plans at least just in case we're not sure if he's going to be back with a concussion. You never know.
This is ridiculous now. Yeah. All the injuries we've had, and now Stroud and Herbert too. It's just
that is tough. Hopefully we get Nico Collins back as well, and you will be healthy there. Another guy that got hurt this week, Josh Jacobs, with a knee injury, left in the 4th quarter, and he did not have a great game leading into this one, being that it was that Vikings game. The entire Raiders offense just looked difficult. I mean, there was no efficiency here for this one. If Josh Jacobs doesn't play, I'm going to assume that Amir Abdullah and Zamir White and a few other guys are going to fill in. But again, because we're going into week 15, they're not guys I'm going to use in my fantasy playoffs if there's no Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, first of all, if Jacobs is able to go in this one, he's been a certified mid-range RB1. He's held up for the most part, had that really slow start. He's bounced back. And as long as you hold up, which, by the way, impressive durability.
Yeah.
I mean, the running back position, it's so hard to put together 2 full seasons. And he's on track. I mean, even when he gets hurt like this in the past, and we thought, he's looking doubtful, he ends up playing and being effective. So props to him. It's hard to be this durable at this position. Just literally no one does it. And he has.
You mentioned it, but especially coming out of last year where he led the league in touches, touched the ball almost 400 times. Yeah. So to be able to do that, I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, we talked about that a lot in the offseason, the fact that there's only a handful of running backs that have appeared in every game over the last 2 seasons, and one of them was Devin Singletary, who was not a full-time player. He was mostly rotated in with other running backs, but Josh Jacobs perhaps can do that this season. But the other part of this, what are the fallback options? What are the plans? So if you look at the running back usage without Jacobs on the field yesterday, 15 snaps for Amir Abdullah, had 1 carry, 2 targets. He's already been used as kind of a situational pass catcher in the past with alongside Jacobs. And then Zamir White, 5 snaps, 2 carries, 0 targets. My expectation here, in a good matchup, by the way, they play the Chargers this week, plus matchup, would be you're going to see most of the carries go to Zamir White, right? So probably 12 to 15 carries for him, maybe 5 to 7 for Amir Abdullah. But when they're throwing the football, I would expect to lean toward Amir Abdullah, who could see 4 or 5 targets. So, and by the way, goal line work goes to the bigger back. Generally, that would be Zamir White. So he'd be the priority add for me, but no more than a flex, because they're going to use 2 guys in an offense that scored 0 points this week and has not been too formidable. So White is the priority, but I wouldn't spend much fab on him.
Again, week 15, potentially fantasy playoffs if it hasn't started for you already. No teams on a bye. So that means that with nobody on a bye and those player pools as deep as they are, the likelihood of me starting these guys is only if my team is just either ravaged by injuries or I'm in a super deep league where I just don't have a ton of options. Otherwise, I kind of want to find a better option.
So what you're saying is, let's hope Josh Jacobs plays in this game.
Let's hope he's back and healthy. Let's hope all the guys that we just talked about that can be back in week 15 are back in week 15, because the game is just more fun when we have superstars like this, Mike. It just is.
I'm with you, and we'll see. And we didn't even get to Brian Robinson hurt before the bye. Yep. Is he going to play in this one? I'm not going to project him at the moment, so we'll see. Remember, he got hurt. So we've a lot to work through this week. Stefani's going to be busy, as usual.
Very busy, absolutely. Yep. All right, Mike, we're going to dive into our Week 14 recap coming up after this. But first, we're going to take a quick break. Help us pay some bills.
All right, do you want me to go first on this one, my friend?
Yeah, you do it.
All right, let's do it. No matter what team you're rooting for, I root for the Eagles. Who do you root for?
I root for the Lions.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
What about you?
Yeah, the Eagles.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't a great week for us. Yeah. Anyway, there's one thing we can all agree on.
Yes.
Football season brings us together.
Yes, it does.
A connection like that deserves to be celebrated with a light beer that's just as great, and at just 96 calories a can. Miller Lite is the only light beer you'll want to celebrate with all season long, because with a Miller Lite in your hand, football doesn't just taste great. It's like Miller time. From kickoff till the final whistle, you can't go wrong with Miller Lite in your hand. It's the only light beer with a taste worthy of our national obsession. Because what's the point of having a beer if it doesn't taste like, well, beer?
Yeah.
It's got only 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12-ounce serving, with a smooth taste and a crisp, clean finish. You get the taste you crave without the calories. So this season, crack open a light beer that hits your taste buds so hard you feel it in your heart. Make it Miller Time all season long. Get Miller Time delivered right to your door. Visit MillerLite.com/FFF, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs for 12 ounces.
Hey, that was pretty good.
Nailed it.
Home, auto, prize, sports, memorabilia, whatever you need to protect, Geico can help get you covered. And with the award-winning Geico mobile app and 24/7 claim support and on-the-go policy access, it is easy to Geico. Go to geico.com today. All right, Mike Clay and Daniel Dopp here talking about our Week 14 recap. Mike, let's start. Go ahead.
Yeah, where else to start but with the powerhouse offense of the week?
The New York Jets.
Naturally. This is what we all thought. We thought, when a quarterback gets benched and then they don't want to start reportedly, and then they finally agree against their will to start for this team that can't score touchdowns all season long, that they will be the most explosive and entertaining offense of the week. By the way, they had, 0 points at halftime in this one?
Yep.
And yet, here we are.
Zach Wilson throws for 301 yards, 2 touchdowns, plus he has 12 yards on the ground, good enough for 19.2 fantasy points. Boy, I'll tell you what. This is less about Zach Wilson because we're not going to use him in fantasy, but in this game at least, in this one, he absolutely elevated everyone else around him, Mike. Breece Hall, 10 carries for 40 yards, plus 8 catches for 86 yards and a receiving touchdown on 9 targets. Breece Hall is tied for second among running backs with 52 receptions on the season. He is getting so much work in the passing game. How'd you feel when you were looking out here at this offense? Not just Breece Hall, but Garrett Wilson as well.
Yeah, so a few things here. We'll start with Breece Hall since you just brought him up. Another poor rushing day. So he's really been surviving on the receiving 50 or fewer rushing yards in 8 straight games.
Wow.
But he's averaging 47 receiving yards per game during that span. So that's really bailed him out. 5 top 12 fantasy weeks in his last 9 games. He's been exactly in the 21st to 27th range in the other 4. So he's given you a high floor even when he's kind of had a down game because of the usage. 18 touches per game during that 9-game span, 89.8 yards per game, 5 touchdowns. He's been fine. I mean, as far as delivering in a really poor offense goes, he's been doing the job. He looks like the real deal. And when they have quarterback fixed in this offense, I think he's really going to thrive. So feeling good about him from a long-term standpoint. Zach Wilson, not a guy you're adding on waivers. Correct. Let's just be clear about that. 19.24 fantasy points in this game. That's not even enough for a top 12 finish. So he will have 0 top 12s.
He's currently QB 12 heading into Monday Night Football with 4 quarterbacks left to play. So he's very likely he will not be top 12.
That's correct. 0 carries. By the way, just not going to give you anything with his legs. And then the only other guy really of note here is Garrett Wilson, who's been living on volume. It's like the same season as last year. He just picked up where he left off with the poor quarterback play. 14 targets, 9 catches, and a $108. This will be his first weekly finish better than 13th this season.
Wow, really?
First one of the season. First 20-plus point fantasy game in over a year. Week 13 of last year. So it's been disappointing. 10-plus targets in 7 games, including 7 of his last 9. He's not going to score touchdowns often in this offense, despite what we saw yesterday. But he's going to see 10, he's going to see 9, 10, 11, 12 targets. It's going to be enough to start him in fantasy as a solid wide receiver too. That's just what we're going to have to deal with. If we get that, we're going to be happy for the rest of the season. Just get us to 2024.
Exactly. You got to be happy if you're getting that. Only a second game over 100 receiving yards, which has been tough, but they get the Miami Dolphins next week. There's at least a chance that game script could have them throwing a bunch, which would be great for both Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson with how much they're being utilized in the passing game. Not that I think the Jets will be as competitive, but this could be a good one coming up.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because Miami's pass defense has been much improved with Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard on the perimeter since Ramsey's been back healthy. We'll see how they look tonight, of course. But again, if you're seeing 9 to 11 targets, you're starting them in fantasy for sure.
Exactly.
By the way, we had a red zone yesterday on for FF Now. One of the questions, will the Jets score 13 points? And at halftime they had 0. I was like, well, I lost that because I was the only one I think to say yes for that. And I was like, well, that's an L. I'm trying to protect my lead. I'm up 4 games.
You are.
I was feeling good in that second half. I was a rare moment where I was a Jets fan. Go Jets.
Go Jets.
Got it done. Got it done for me.
That was a very surprising game in all honesty. But awesome. Hey, listen, all the stuff that Zach Wilson has had to go through, all the stuff that we've talked about, it's nice for me to be able to see him have a nice one on the field.
Look, I'm rooting for all these guys, so for sure. But I did think that was odd last week to be like, I don't want to. I don't know how much truth there was to that. If he didn't want to start, but if he didn't want to start, that's really bizarre because man, you got to play better. You know, it's on you too.
Hey, let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens because they played pretty okay as well. Went deep into overtime. The way this game ended, on a punt return for a touchdown.
How about that?
Was pretty exciting. Let's talk about Lamar Jackson, though. 24 for 43. So not super efficient when it comes to passing, but 316 passing yards plus 3 touchdowns and an interception. Oh, and 11 carries for 70 yards. Good enough for 31.6 fantasy points. This was classic Lamar Jackson out there this week in a game that we were wondering how much is he going to throw because of the rain and all the weather that was going on there. This was an incredible game. QB1 heading into Monday Night Football.
Yeah, he sure is. But you look at his last 6 games, very inconsistent.
He has been, yes.
2 top 5 fantasy outings, but 4 finishes outside the top 12. So, man, the state of quarterback.
It's tough. It's tough.
We just can't get it done consistently. Only his second game with 300 passing yards and his second with more than 2 passing touchdowns this season. Both of them happened in the same game. Good matchup this week, playing Jacksonville, 3rd most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks on a per game basis this season. So it's Lamar Jackson. He gets done with his legs. He's been fine as a passer. He's been a top end fantasy quarterback. So we're still starting him and really like the matchup, obviously, this week.
Yeah, there were 3 guys that felt like he really zeroed in on this one, and that was Zay Jones and OBJ. Both had 10 targets.
Flowers.
Sorry, did I say Zay Jones again? I did that yesterday on FF
sure
Now.
You sure did.
Zay Flowers and OBJ both had 10 targets. So you love being able to see that volume work. OBJ feels like he got a little bit lucky because of that deep touchdown pass. Without that, you would have had a different day. But you love seeing both of them get this kind of volume. And it wasn't just those 2 guys, although we can talk about them. Isaiah Likely also came on and looked good without Mark Andrews there. So without Mark Andrews, definitely getting some more targets to the rest of this receiving core.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Flowers, we've been starting, and now he's had 2 back-to-back 20-plus point games, the first 2 of his career. So we're feeling better about him, especially coming off a career-high 11 targets. And Beckham, yeah, I mean, look, we're going to have to rank him at least as a flex option at this point. He's been good as of late, 13.5 fantasy points per game in his last 5 games, 7+ targets in 3 of 5. He's still playing around half the snaps.
Yep.
But the fact is the targets have been there for him. Hasn't had a 20-point game, but he has 3 touchdowns in his last 4 games. So feeling good about Flowers, feeling good about Beckham as a flex option. And you mentioned a Likely. I don't know if I feel like he's a must start at this point, but he's borderline based on what we've seen. 20% target share this week, 21% last week. That's starting caliber sort of usage. But this was also the 2nd highest fantasy point total of his career. So we don't want to get too carried away on it. But the fact is he's kind of slipped right into the Mark Andrews role. The target's not quite equivalent to Andrews, but definitely trending up. So borderline tight end 1.
That's what I have written down here. Not seeing peak Mark Andrews volume, but still enough targets to be rostered in more than 39.5% of leagues.
Yeah, and he's playing that position. Like his route participation, his snaps are equivalent to where Andrews was. That's a good sign.
Yeah. You love to see that. So all 3 of these pass catchers, I think you at least have to look at. When you look at the running backs, it was tough sledding this week. Was there anything that you took away from either Keaton Mitchell or Gus Edwards in this one?
I think we cannot start Gus Edwards right now because we're still using all 3 guys. Justice Hill had a role in this one. Keaton Mitchell.
Again, only 9 carries. Why will they not give him more touches?
What were we talking about yesterday? His line on ESPN Bet was 9.5, and he had never been over that before. And of course, he fell short. Now, naturally, I actually wrote up for the bet playbook. I wrote under rushing yards, and I think he just got over that line. But overall, a good week for the playbook, as we're going to get to a little later.
Yes,
so we had a little fun
yes,
again with that parlay. So we'll talk about that later. But nonetheless, I think Keaton Mitchell is your top flex option. But this is a 3-man backfield, and that's going to make it very risky to rely on.
After scoring 5 straight weeks, this is his 2nd week in a row that he did not have a touchdown for Gus Edwards. And it is a massive reminder that Gus Edwards is a touchdown-dependent running back because he doesn't do anything for you in the passing game, and he doesn't get a ton of volume right now with everyone else in this offense. So unless he gets in the end zone, likely going to be tough sledding for Gus Edwards.
Yeah, we have guys like him and Mostert scoring. Both of them have 12-plus touchdowns this year, and neither of them are guys that were like, we feel great starting them in fantasy. Neither of them, It
is frustrating.
Yeah.
It is very frustrating, unfortunately. So better days are ahead. You said they draw the Jaguars next week in Jacksonville, so we'll see how that one goes. That'll be a big game. Both of these guys are making their way towards the fantasy playoffs, or towards the regular NFL playoffs, excuse me. All right, back here on Fantasy Focus, Mike Clay and Daniel Dopp holding things down. Mike, let's dive into, we talked about some positive things. The Ravens had a really good game. We talked about the Jets and everything that Zach Wilson brought to the table. Now let's talk about a disappointing quarterback.
Okay. Who could this be? What?
Patrick Mahomes.
No way.
We had him outside the top 5 for the first time since I can remember ever.
In our ranks this
Yes,
last week.
as a ranking. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this week, he is quarterback 18 before Monday Night Football when 4 quarterbacks still have to play. 25 for 43, 271 yards and a touchdown plus an interception. Here are Patrick Mahomes' last 6 finishes. And this you talked about this yesterday. Quarterback 32, quarterback 12, quarterback 14, quarterback 8, quarterback 17, quarterback 18. So right now he's had 1 finish inside the top 10.
That's Derek Carr you're
in
talking
the
about?
last 6 weeks. Are we at a point where Patrick Mahomes is just name value and we're starting him because of the name? Or is there a chance that you could go a different direction because of how bad he's like? If you're making the fantasy playoffs, it feels like it's been in spite of Patrick Mahomes, not because of Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just name. I mean, he gets the benefit of the doubt to an extent, but he is 10th in fantasy points per game at quarterback this season. So he's at least startable. Like he's a QB1, even if he's not a good QB1. He's not a good QB1 right now. Yeah. He's a mid to back end QB1. And frankly, he's been worse than that as of late. Now, the question becomes, how are we going to rank him moving forward? They play at New England this week. We'll see what the weather looks like a week from now. But, you know, I'm probably going to have him around QB 8 or 9, sort of in that range. New England has been pretty good
really good
defensively over the last month or so. So this could be another tough game for him. Patriots, by the way, 6th fewest fantasy points a quarterback. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, I mean, look, he's just not an elite fantasy option at quarterback anymore, but he's been serviceable enough to hang on the QB1 radar. And as we just talked about, everyone else is hurt. Like at least he's not injured like everyone else. And we might lose 2 more with Herbert and Stroud. So he's going to still be a starting option this week, but I don't feel great about it.
Yeah.
You know? He has 2 weekly finishes better than 7th this season. Just know what? He doesn't have that upside like he's had in years past.
Why? Like, what is that? Is that, I mean, because he's rushing more than I think he ever has, right? But he doesn't feel like he's had that guy.
Passing touchdowns.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, Travis Kelce has been fine, but he has not been Travis Kelce. And it has been late. Like, the resurgence of Rashee Rice has just been recent. We'll talk about him in a second, but like, we've been waiting to see a guy. There hasn't been like the go-to guy in this offense. So this one has been really tough for me because Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
For me, when I look at this, it's just like, I don't know what to do with Patrick Mahomes. I don't want to start him the way that I've watched him play these last handful of games. And that feels sacrilegious. Like the idea of even just saying those words out loud. I don't want to start Patrick Mahomes because this is a guy that still seems like he's got 35, 38, 40-point upside on any given week. He could find Travis Kelce for 185 yards and 3 touchdowns next week against the Patriots. And I wouldn't be shocked. The only thing is it's like, the guy that we used to see is no longer there right now because this offense just doesn't look like a Patrick Mahomes Chiefs-led offense anymore.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Part of it is game script they're still winning games for the most part they have this season. I believe they're 8-4 now. Is it 8-4? 9-4? Something like that.
They lost last night, right? So they're 8-5.
Yeah, so but nonetheless, they're still a team with a winning record. Their defense is playing well. It's not like he's in a lot of shootouts where he needs to throw for 370 yards and 3 touchdowns. And that has limited him, and not to mention the lack of skill guys, right? Yeah. It's just been disappointing for most of the season. Rashee Rice has come along now and been terrific and is a must-start, probably going to be in our top 20 in the ranks this week. But yeah, Kelsey's down, and the other guys have struggled badly, and we saw that again in this week. A mistake by Kadarius Toney cost them another, what would have been a passing touchdown. So it's all that. I mean, you think about Mahomes, you think about games with 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, maybe 5 touchdowns. He has 2 games with more than 2 this year.
That's crazy.
So that's that's what's happened. He just doesn't have that sort of pass volume or pass touchdowns, pass yardage. Those kind of things have been limited, even in a pass heavy offense. It's just been disappointing. But at the end of the day, especially with all these injuries, he's still a guy that's going to be in our lineups.
Yeah. Well, you talk about Rashee Rice. I think we had talked about it yesterday. Are we watching this breakout happen before our eyes of Rashee Rice, right? Over the last 3 weeks, wide receiver 9 in fantasy points per game, wide receiver 6 in targets, wide receiver 3 in receptions, wide receiver 8 in receiving yards, and he found the end zone twice. 18.2 fantasy points last week. In spite of the struggles that we have seen Mahomes and the rest of this offense has, Rashee Rice feels like a lock it in. You got to start this guy moving forward.
Yeah, by the way, did you do the anytime touchdown bet?
I did.
We talked about it. You
yes,
did.
We did.
Money in every other week. He scored exactly 1 touchdown in every other game going back to week 5, which is kind of incredible that it's just kind of gone back and forth. Like a little fluky, but just kind of a fun little stat. But yeah, he's been awesome. Target shares have been huge. He has clearly established himself as their number 1 receiver.
Yep.
It's 3 games in a row now. If they go away from him now and he plays 52% of the snaps and his 3 targets, like that, well, like, what are we doing? Like, are we the Falcons at this point? Like, what are you doing? I don't think that's going to happen, though. I think they've settled on him as their guy. And frankly, they're number 1 right now.
Yep.
He's out targeting and outperforming Travis Kelce. He should be a lineup block. And again, I don't know if I rank him 17th this week, it might be too low. Yeah. Honestly, I don't think he could be outside our top 20.
Travis Kelce continues to be consistent with his floor, right? 14.3 fantasy points. He had 6 catches for 83 yards on 10 targets. But it just feels like, I don't want to say we lost our ceiling for Travis Kelce, but that ceiling is just not something that we're seeing as often as we're used to seeing it. He still has 25-point upside, but we're seeing more 13, 14, 15-point Travis Kelce games, which is a little different than what we thought coming into this game with the way that he has dominated that tight end position. So I think that's obviously factored into a little bit with the way that Patrick has struggled here.
Yeah, and that's just an extension of what we just laid out with Mahomes. If the yards aren't there and certainly the touchdowns aren't there, I mean, Kelce can't have a 2 or 3 touchdown game if they're only scoring 1 or 2 touchdowns, right? So that's been the problem for him as well. I'm not sure he's playing at the level he was in years past either, which I don't know. We thought he was past his prime going into last year, coming off a down year, and he bounced back in a big way. So maybe if he has some additional help next year, maybe a bounce back year. But right now, yeah. And by the way, still the number 1 fantasy tight end. Yes. Again, it's just the stated position's not great. He's just not, he doesn't have that separation over the field like he did in the past.
Yeah, technically he should have had a 7th. Well, I shouldn't say should have had a 7th catch. Could have had a 7th catch for a number of yards. And I don't know how they would have ruled that play that didn't count, but that would have been something to figure out.
He would have got the catch and receiving yards, and then Tony would have got the additional receiving yards
Mahomes
and the
still
touchdown.
wouldn't have had the touchdown pass.
No, I think he would have. Yeah, I think it's still a touchdown pass. There's a lateral, so it's still a touchdown pass, and then Tony gets the receiving yards and the touchdown catch. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was a play I'm sure everyone has been talking about a bunch. We'll keep moving on for right now, though. Let's talk about Zack Moss on this one. Zack Moss, this was the second week we thought, you know what? No Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to keep trusting the process. He's going to keep getting volume. Mike, second week in a row, unfortunately, trusting the process did not work out for fantasy production.
Yeah, it wasn't great. 89% of the snaps, though, he was on the field. He was still a full-time guy. And by the way, had opportunities at the goal line. This could have went way differently. And sometimes that's the nature of the beast with fantasy football. Sometimes the process is right. I have no qualm starting him. He's still, you look at the last 2 weeks, he's 32 carries and 7 targets. I'd like to see more target volume, but the 32 carries is big, but still under 10 fantasy points in both. So it's been disappointing, but again, I'm still going to rank him as now maybe a good RB2 because you can't argue with this volume. And again, it's not, he was right there. Like if he falls another direction, he might have a touchdown. Maybe he would add a second touchdown. He was there. And we're going to always chase the volume in this sort of situation. And by the way, from a DFS standpoint, we loved him in cash. I had him in my lineup each of the last 2 weeks, and I had 2 of my best weeks of the season because he was so cheap. You're able to build around that. That's why you go after guys like that. Like he's still going to get you a handful of points at least at that low price point. And again, if we bench him this week, he's going for 25. The volume is just too good right now.
If you say to me, Daniel, do you want to start a running back that has 39 touches over the last 2 weeks? The answer is always going to be yes.
Of course, at least as a flex, floor of a flex, no doubt. Yeah,
I'm with you. All right, back here on Fantasy Focus, Daniel Dopp and Mike Clay diving into our Week 13 recap. Mike, we just came out of a handful of players that were frustrating for fantasy managers. Let's talk about someone that we actually had lowered expectations on coming into this game in Cooper Kupp. 8 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown on 10 targets, 25.5 fantasy points. Because of the weather and the rain and all the things, we didn't think that we were going to see a lot of passing in this one. So we had Cooper Kupp. I had him just outside my top 25. Still, I was saying he was a flex play for us, but he was about as low as I had ever had him. Looked fantastic in this one. Is there any momentum, do you think, that can be carried into the next game with the Commanders coming out of this?
Yeah, so just a few minutes ago, we talked about Zack Moss and why you just follow volume, right? And that applies to wide receivers as well. And as though Kupp had been struggling, he was seeing a lot of targets and a big target share. So now you look at the last 2 weeks, 18 targets. It's 9 per game. That's great. You're not benching a player getting that much volume.
Nope.
14 catches, so good efficiency, 14 out of 18. 154 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's 9th in fantasy points per game among receivers over the last 2 weeks. So it's like last week we're literally 24 hours ago, we're panicking about this guy. He's top 10 in fantasy points per game that quick. And that's not just yesterday. That's back-to-back pretty good games. This week, by the way, great matchup.
Yeah.
They draw Washington. Now, Washington's coming off the bye, but especially since they traded away their 2 edge rushers, atrocious defensively, especially against the pass, second most fantasy points allowed. So Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, feeling great about this situation this week. Look, we're not going to overreact. We're not going to put Kupp 5th and Nacua 7th.
No.
They're not at that level.
Right.
We've seen too many duds over the last month and a half, but enough that you feel better starting them, especially in this matchup.
I thought it was very fun. That's nothing to do with fantasy, but in listening to this game and watching it, it was cool to talk about. I think Aaron Donald had said the only quarterback that he had not sacked in his career that he wanted to was Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one guy he has been trying to get to. And it's like the one guy that he can never get to because Lamar is just Lamar, which was very fun. But this was a very fun game to watch. I love being able to watch Matthew Stafford still. So being able to have him find, Cooper Kupp and like he looked out there. You needed a streamer. Like he didn't look terrible.
Yeah, Stafford hasn't been great from a fantasy perspective, but again, he is maybe this week's he's a streamer with the injuries and this good matchup against Baltimore. And I thought he looked pretty sharp in this one. I thought he looked good late in the season, tough environment at Baltimore, and he looked good. So I hear you. At the very least, he's playing well enough to keep Nacua and Kupp afloat in fantasy. That's what we want.
Kyren Williams is going to keep being Kyren Williams. He's still getting.
He might have 37 touches
exactly.
This
The
week.
volume is unreal.
Yeah.
So, Mike, let's move ahead and talk about Sunday Night Football.
Let's not do that.
Well, I don't know if I should start this one off or if I just open up the floor because you being our resident Eagles fan, when you're watching your Eagles offense, let's start there.
You know it's bad when like the first stat for the Eagles is a defensive touchdown. That's always great. That's always a great sign that things went well. Yes.
When you look at this offense, Jalen Hurts, 18 for 27, only 197 yards. I mean, what happened here for the Philadelphia Eagles?
They're just not playing well lately. I feel like they were hanging. I feel like if you watch the Eagles all season long, you're not totally shocked by this. I thought the Chiefs would beat them. I picked the Chiefs that week. I thought the first time they played Dallas, I thought it was a toss-up. Then they beat Buffalo. And it's just like, man, whoever they play to that level of competition. They lost to the Jets. They almost lost to Washington. They kind of just been hanging on, and the offense is weird. Like it struggles in the first half, then it gets going, and they just barely win games. And it's kind of catching up with them now because they're not as good as their record indicated. And I'm biggest Eagles fan, maybe, and I picked them to lose each of the last 2 weeks, and they have. They're just not playing well enough right now. And they went into Dallas and played a surging, red-hot, really talented Cowboys team, and they got their butts kicked for the second week in a row. Now, I will say this from a fantasy perspective. Jalen Hurts will be fine. Okay. He was a top 12 scoring fantasy quarterback in 11 consecutive games before Sunday night. This was his worst fantasy output since that game in week 18 against the Giants last season. Much better matchup now. It's not the Niners and the Cowboys like the last 2 weeks. They're playing at Seattle. In this one, a team that has been inconsistent, we'll say, defensively. So not worried about him from a fantasy standpoint. Better days ahead. And by the way, the Eagles arguably have the easiest remaining schedule this season. At Seattle, then they have the Giants twice, and I believe Arizona's the other game. So rest of the schedule, beautiful for them.
Gosh, that would be really nice for the fantasy players. Yeah, at Seattle, New York Giants, Arizona at home, and then finishing at New York. So that's tough.
Yeah, all in the Northeast after Monday night. So if they get past that one, and by the way, losing these 2 games, the conference is wide open, so they might have to play competitively in the final 2 weeks of the season. It's not going to be like if they won the last 2 and they're resting everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you're playing into week 18, that will be a variable for you.
Both of these wide receivers at least saw 10-plus targets. How do you feel about both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith?
Smith actually with Dallas Goedert back still sustained a high target share, so you feel better about that. He's a guy we're still, whatever. I mean, we're talking about 2 lineup blocks. A.J. Brown was terrific. He got slowed in the first half. Stephon Gilmore was on him a lot. And then just a lot of big fantasy day. The guy is such a high floor. The target share was 33%, I believe, in this one, which is huge. Same old story. Brown, top 5 fantasy wide receiver. Devontae Smith still a wide receiver 2. If you want to knock him a little bit with Goddard back, a fringe wide receiver 2, lineup blocks.
All right, so then this is the real question in this offense. What the heck are we doing with DeAndre Swift?
Yeah, that is the question.
This is the hard part, right? Getting some volume, but this is his 4th game out of the last 5 where he has not reached 10 fantasy points. Single digits in this one, 11 carries for 39 yards. And the thing that is most alarming to me, and has been all season long, no passing work. Yeah. He's turned into a touchdown dependent, or he needs a bunch of touches to be able to score fantasy points. He's just not getting, other than a handful of games early in the season, he is not seeing a lot of volume in the passing game. So looking at DeAndre Swift, you talk about how good this Eagles matchup is for the rest of the season with this schedule. How do you feel about DeAndre Swift and the confidence that you can have in him given how he's played recently?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say I'm going to start him this week at Seattle, 5th most fantasy points to running back. So, again, we're he's just played Dallas and San Francisco. It's been tough sledding.
Yep.
Before that, it was, Buffalo and Kansas City,
and then Dallas
again.
that.
I mean, it's been a rough road, but he does have, his snaps are down a little bit the last 2 weeks, on top of the fact that he is now under 10 fantasy points in 3 straight and 4 of his last 5. 17 total carries in his last 2 games. Had 0 targets in this game, to your point, but he had 6 last week, so that's been inconsistent. But 3 or fewer targets in 6 of his last 7.
Yep.
So there's kind of a lot to unpack there, but the fact is they've scaled back his work a little bit. The passing game work is not great and certainly down from earlier this season, and his efficiency and production has not been great either. However, we just said it, the schedule is going to be better over the final month of the season. I do think better days are ahead. I'm going to rank him a little lower based on his recent usage, but still going to be a borderline RB2 against Seattle. It's a good matchup. I just think the offense is going to look much better the final month.
My biggest concern is those games against the Giants, because we've talked about it. Is that going to stop being a DeAndre Swift week, and will that become a Boston Scott week?
So yeah, over under. I'd say the over under on Boston Scott touchdowns in those 2 games is probably 1.5. Yeah, safely. Considering he doesn't touch the ball a lot, but. I'd take the over if I could get it.
If you could get it there, yeah. Let's talk about these Dallas Cowboys. They look fantastic. Again, playing at home. This was, I don't know, like their 100th game, scoring 30 or more points. They're just unreal, especially in Dallas. That offense is just clicking. I don't know as though there's an offense that looks better right now than, well, maybe the 49ers and the Cowboys both look fantastic.
Wait, before we started this, you should have said, here we go.
That's it. That's it. Every time.
That's, by the way, if you watch the game, from Chris Collinsworth, a great guy. I love him. Not defaming him at all here, but that's why they're playing so well. That was a hot topic last night. I'll just say that. Love Chris, by the way.
Really good.
That was a fun topic last night. But anyway, yeah, they're crushing it. They're crushing it. Dak has been fantastic. Actually, 17.9 fantasy points in this game. Second lowest in his last 8 games. Lowest. Yeah. I mean, that's like his floor, 17 points. He'll take that all day long. 26.7 per game in his last 8 games. After that, rough first month of the season. Droppable in fantasy, frankly. He's been elite.
And everybody that you think is a lineup block in this offense, Tony Pollard, you're still starting him. CeeDee Lamb, you're still starting him. Jake Ferguson, you're still starting him, given what the tight end position is. Like this offense is clicking as much as it possibly can be. It looks like.
And by the way, 8 targets for Pollard, matched a season high in this one. Didn't score. He had a touchdown in 3 straight games. Didn't score in this one, but had 96 yards. So he's been much better as of late.
Yep, that's what we've been looking for Tony Pollard. Hopefully that continues into our fantasy playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mike, let's talk about a couple other big weeks here. Another huge week for David Njoku.
I know. You know what? You know why this one hurts me?
Why?
Why does this hurt me? Come on.
Were you playing
FF now yesterday?
Against David Njoku?
No. I have Njoku. Again, he was another guy getting cut like a month of the season in fantasy because he got off to a slow start. It hurts me because he's been my DFS cash game lineup tight end for like a month straight right now because he's been really solid and his price has not gone up and he's just, scored a couple touchdowns, had a good game. He was just kind of holding down the fort. He's not going to be cheap this week.
Not this week.
This is what happens. Okay. 8 targets, 6 catches, 91 yards, 2 touchdowns. Second highest fantasy point total of his career.
Yep.
In this one for David Njoku. But again, the volume, this is why we chase volume.
Yeah.
Right. 8.6 targets per game and 55 yards per game in his last 8 outings, 10 plus fantasy points in 8 of 9. He has had such a high floor. And now you saw what seeing that kind of usage will lead to. Sometimes you're going to have these spike weeks, and that's what we saw from Njoku. So we're not going to get 2 touchdown games most of the time, but a good connection here with Joe Flacco and a good matchup this week against Chicago. They've given up a ton to the tight end position. So Njoku, certified tight end 1. By the way, his target share kind of down a little bit this week. You might say okay, it's Joe Flacco. He's just locking in on him. That connection's great. The efficiency's been good, but targets were down a little bit, but the production continues to be excellent. So Njoku, just outstanding.
Joe Flacco threw the ball 45 times on Sunday.
Yeah.
Like that is a ton. So yeah, as long as
he looks good.
Honestly, he really does. And it's very clear to me that Njoku has become a consistent target for Joe within this offense. And I think you said it, something similar to this, but at least 10 fantasy points in 7 of his last 8. So he's been a very high floor for everything that you need at the tight end position. Exactly.
You're getting 10 plus at tight end. You'll take that all day long.
Every single time. Mm-hmm. So he is a lock it in, set it and forget it tight end 1 for us right now. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. We haven't talked about them in this show in a while.
Yeah, well, I said on FF now, it's the team we don't talk about anymore. I didn't want to talk about them, right? But they were actually formidable, in this one, at least from a fantasy perspective. The question is, will it continue?
That is the question on the DFS segment. Tyler came in and said, you know what? I'm going to play Drake London in my DFS lineup. If you can't get it done against the Bucs, then who can you get it done against?
Fair point.
And Drake London got it done against the Bucs. 10 catches for 172 yards on 11 targets, 29.2 fantasy points. Best game of the season. Only his second game with 10 or more targets, though. That's the frustration here for Drake London. Like, this kid is so good. This is one of those things. I watch a game like this, and I'm like, why are we not throwing the ball to this guy this much every single game this year, Mike? I don't understand it.
Yeah, I agree. And not necessarily the best game of his career, not necessarily only the best game of his season, maybe of his career. Because he had career highs in catches, yards, and fantasy points in this one with 29.2. But here's the thing. Second weekly finish better than 19th this year. Only the second better than 19th. 29th or lower in his prior 5 games. So can we trust this after what we've seen? Absolutely not. I'm not there yet. I need to see it more. Excuse me. And facing Carolina this week, teams run on them. And that's what Atlanta wants to do. They're the run-heaviest offense in the NFL. We'll see a lot of Bijan Robinson in this game. Tyler Algier, Cordell Patterson will be mixed in. Could be a 4-target, 2-catch, 27-yard game from Drake London. I hope I'm wrong.
I hope you're wrong, too.
And they open up this offense finally, but I'm not confident that it will happen. So I'll be ranking London as a deep league flex at best. I just don't trust it yet.
Well, you talk about those 2 games where he was top 20. You look at what they've done. Ironically, the 2 games he has this year with 10 or more targets, 9 for 125, 21.5 fantasy points in this one, 10 for 172 for 29.2 fantasy points. He's had over 20 fantasy points in both of the weeks. He's seen at least 10 targets. I think the hard part, like you're describing, is what are you going to do with him this week against Carolina? Because this is one of those games where it's like, wow, am I going to bench a guy coming off of a 29-point week going into the fantasy playoffs?
If you've watched the Falcons last 2 years.
If you've seen the way this offense, like that would be a bold move to go with Drake London. But this kid is so good at football. Honestly, Kyle Pitts looked pretty okay in this one too. 3 for 57 and a touchdown on 6 targets. I don't know how to quantify what to do with Kyle Pitts at this point. He's still that guy that it's like he's going to be outside my top 10 of tight end because he just doesn't see enough within this offense on a week in and week out basis. This just happened to be one of the weeks where you find the painted area. It helps you in the fantasy department.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Double-digit fantasy points only 3 times this season, weeks 5 and 6, and then this game, week 17. 14 targets in his last 2 games. That is up. His target share is up. And I was like, is this just a fluke? You know, because we've seen this before from him, including weeks 5 and 6 earlier this year.
Yep.
But his route participation up substantially the last 2 weeks, back to where it was when he was peaking a couple years ago and where he was to open this season. I'm wondering if now he's finally healthy and they're like, all right, let's expand his role. Okay. If we're throwing the ball, he's going to run a route. That has not been the case for most of this season. So there could be something here. Now, again, I'm with you. I think it's like we like to be cautiously optimistic. I'm cautiously pessimistic with the Falcons offense. I'm not going to dive back in on Pitts and rank him 9th this week, but I like the fact that he's running more routes and the targets are following. So we'll see what happens in week 3. If you're in a desperate spot at tight end and you want to stream him, I think you have some justification for that. But you're safer waiting maybe one more week, and we'll see how it goes.
We'll see how that continues to play out. All right, let's talk about the Chicago Bears here real quickly. Mike, the running back situation feels like it's just been back and forth all year long. For a while, we thought Rashawn Johnson was the guy, and then Khalil Herbert also looked good. D'Onta Foreman feels like the guy in this one, 11 carries for 50 yards. Plus, is like the only one that was getting targets there. 3 targets, 2 receptions for 22 yards. All of that was only good enough for 9.2 fantasy points. But it did feel like D'Onta Foreman, if you were looking for a running back, was the guy in this one.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, Foreman for a big stretch earlier this season was a healthy scratch for this team. But when Herbert went out, he stepped in and played well and essentially took the job. It seems that he has taken the lead back job. It wasn't even close. 37 snaps. Rashawn Johnson played 18. Khalil Herbert 11. So he outsnapped them combined in this game. You mentioned it. 11 carries to 4 combined for them. 16 pass routes to 13 combined for the other 2.
Wow.
He's the lead man right now in the Chicago offense. And by the way, are the Bears good now? Like, I want to say great, but like, are they maybe an average team? Like I
think so.
They did a number on the Lions really twice. I mean, the Lions came back and won the first one, but they've been competitive now. Yes. Getting Montez Sweat there, having a healthy Justin Fields and this chemistry with DJ Moore, which by the way,
looks unreal.
that connection. 5 straight really good fantasy games for DJ Moore when Fields has been out there. They might have something here. They're building something there in Chicago, and that team is much better than it was earlier this season.
Well, thankfully, they don't have a good draft pick this year. Oh, wait, no, they have the first overall pick, and they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do with that. I mean, that's really the big question mark. I think Justin Fields playing well right now is as good as it can get for Justin. Like, he needs to play well.
This final month is a huge evaluation period. And by the way, of course, they have that first pick because they have Carolina's first overall first pick because of the Bryce Young trade. So they'll pick first and then probably like 8th or something. So perhaps a bright future here for Chicago. But you're right, you got to get quarterback right.
Yeah, gosh, that is tough. All right, let's talk Justin Fields really quickly in this one. He owns my Detroit Lions. I just want to say this. In the 2 games he's played against Detroit this year, 30 carries for 162 yards and a touchdown. Wow. Both games, it was over 20 fantasy points. He's looked unreal. And because of the connection with DJ Moore, I'm starting to have different thoughts based on what we've seen. Mike, I think you had laid out on Fantasy Football Now the last 4 healthy games with DJ Moore with Justin Fields, 27.1, 49, 22.6 and 22.4, and then yesterday 26.8. He just continues to add to it. He's had over 22 fantasy points in 5 straight games with a healthy Justin Fields under center. Is there a better wide receiver right now, not named Tyreek Hill, over the last 5 games like that than DJ Moore?
No, he's been nothing short of elite. You're putting him up there with Tyreek and CeeDee Lamb during that stretch. Now,
CeeDee, of course.
The question is, can he sustain that this week? Because they're playing Cleveland. In Cleveland,
much tougher.
That's going to be a much tougher matchup. But I mean, we're still starting Moore. Target share's been huge. He's been productive. They're starting to give him the ball in the running game or 2. He's had a couple carries, which is a change. We haven't seen a lot of that in Chicago. It's something he did a lot in Carolina. Actually had a rushing touchdown in this game. But as for Justin Fields, same kind of thing here, right? His legs make him a guy that's really hard to bench. His last 5 full games, his fantasy finishes are 4th, 1st, 8th, 22nd, and 3rd pending Monday Night Football this week. 2 games, obviously. Big time rushing production, though, since he's been back. So even though this is a tough matchup against Cleveland, I think we knock him down to like a back end QB1. You're still going to start him because even if he can't throw it, and he throws for 120 yards and 1 touchdown, he might run it for 80 yards and another touchdown.
Exactly.
So that's going to be enough for top 10, top 12 numbers. So, yeah, we're still starting him.
Yep. All right, let's talk about, before we move on to the next one, we did get official word, breaking news. Justin Herbert will not start on Thursday. He is going to miss Thursday Night Football game. That comes from Adam Schefter. We expected that based on some of the news that we've heard, but just making sure that everyone is aware so that we are fully up to date with everything.
That's better than hearing he's officially out for the season. So we'll keep an eye on that. Hopefully we get him back for the fantasy playoffs. Yeah. In a couple of like the 2nd, 3rd round of the fantasy playoffs, but we'll see. It's going to be tricky with a broken finger and you're throwing it.
It would be tough. Yeah. Hey, man, if you need a backup streaming quarterback, so right now in our Fantasy Focus League, where I'm in 2nd place, Justin Herbert is my quarterback, and he just got hurt. So now heading into the playoffs, my other quarterback with Josh Dobbs, not a great option necessarily in Week 15. So for me, I'm going to go out and look at a guy like Jake Browning, Mike, with the way that he's played the last couple of weeks, 18 for 24 in this one, 275 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception, plus got into the end zone again with his legs, 23.7 fantasy points, currently rostered in just 28.6% of fantasy leagues. Jake Browning feels like he's on the streaming radar.
By the way, you just reminded me that in our Dynasty League, which I'm in the battling for the 1 seed with Matthew, I have Justin Herbert and I had Deshaun Watson. That's super flex. It's gonna be Geno Smith and Russell Wilson for me in the first round of the playoffs here. Or no, I guess I should have a bye next week with Herbert out. So let's hope he comes back.
Fingers crossed.
Are you going to make the playoffs in that one?
I will not. I have a chance to, even though I didn't want to. Yeah,
you didn't want to.
No, I was trying to be at the tail end of everything, but C.J. Stroud and some of the other guys on my roster have just kept me in it, though I didn't expect it. So
that's good though. You're
exactly.
Yeah, you're overachieving in a rebuild year. That's good. But anyway, we'll come back to that at some point. But anyway, Browning has been terrific. He's playing at a very high level. Cincinnati has switched away from one of the pass heaviest offenses in the league to one of the run heaviest over the last 2 weeks, but that hasn't stopped Browning from putting up fantasy points, 23 plus in his last 2 games, 275 plus passing yards and a rushing touchdown in both of those games. And how about this for efficiency? 61 pass attempts. He's completed 50 over the last 2 weeks.
That's pretty good.
82%. They play Minnesota this week, a team that just shut a team out, but It is a game that's at home in Cincinnati, and he's been playing well. I'm not super worried about the Minnesota defense. So Browning is, I don't know if I'm going to rank because they're running so much. I don't know if I feel great streaming him, but if you're in a tough spot, he's an option. You should be on benches right now.
I'm in a tough spot. So like I'm going to be in a spot where I've got to go to the waiver wire to find someone. And I think he's one of the guys I'm at least going to look at here in this one. So Mike, really quickly, let's close this YouTube segment out by talking about the parlay because you are on fire. Oh my gosh, Fantasy Focus parlay hits again. Everyone needs to start paying attention to Mike Clay. Tell us what you had
finally,
in this
you're
one.
learning.
Exactly.
Finally, I'm getting through to you. Yeah, these hit quickly. Like Chuba Hubbard actually was close. Well, it seemed close because he got hurt early in that game. He left and went to the blue tent. I was like, uh-oh. But then he came back in and he was already at like
rushes,
when I checked, he was at like 11 carries immediately, and then cleared this with ease. Josh Allen, I took I think second quarter, he threw an interception, got that one, and then CeeDee Lamb first drive. He scored, and then there was a flag, and then they picked up the flag, so we had a little drama on that one. But this felt like look, parlay. I'm never gonna say it's easy because there's so much variance in the NFL, but these felt like pretty safe plays this week. So hopefully you all saw this one, played it for the second week in a row. But we're 2 for 2. We're not gonna always get them. Parlays are tough. Again, high variance game. We're gonna miss legs once in a while, but the bet playbook's been red hot the last couple of weeks, and obviously that's where I'm pulling these parlays from, and they've crushed for us. So see if we can do it again.
Go check that out.
Number 15.
Absolutely. Bet Playbook available on ESPN Plus and ESPN Bet. You can download the app. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, back here on Fantasy Focus. Mike Clay and Daniel Dopp finishing out our Week 14 recap. And Mike, we're not recapping anything right now. We're talking Monday Night Football. We got 2 games tonight to be able to look at. Titans and Dolphins and Packers at Giants. Couple things that we want people to know in this one. First and foremost, doesn't sound like we're going to have Aaron Jones in this one. So if you have Aaron Jones still in your fantasy lineup, make sure that you go pull him out. Hopefully you have A.J. Dillon or one of the other running backs in this game, or maybe you move him to a flex like I suggested on FF Now so that you can have someone to play, but make sure that you have him out of your lineup. Honestly, Mike, when I'm looking at these games, to me, it's about one thing. I'm watching Tyreek Hill. I want to see what does Tyreek Hill do? How much closer are we getting to 2K watch, knowing that he's going to break my Calvin Johnson's record, right? It's very important to me that records, in spite of the fact that there's an extra game, I don't care about that. I love that records get broken. I like this is part of what is fun about football. So for me, I want to see what Tyreek Hill looks like in this one. He played less than half the snaps last week against the Commanders and still put up like 150 some yards. So I'm very excited to be able to watch that and see how Tua and Tyreek look, as well as Jalen Waddle. What are you looking for in these 2 games?
Yeah, I'm with you. And Miami, by the way, very aware what he's going for. It's not it's like, we didn't realize he was that close. Everyone knows what he's trying to do here.
Seems like the kind of coach that wants to help his players get there.
100%. Great matchup here against Tennessee. Just what he needs. Another great matchup here for Tyreek Hill. So watching that, we'll see Devon Achane. I want to see if he is another, pushes for 18, 20 touches again, because I mentioned this on FF Now yesterday. Raheem Mostert took I think it was 13 of the first 15 running back carries for Miami last week, and then it was a blowout and they rested everyone. Then he took none of the final 18, and that's when Achane took over. So is Mostert still the lead back? We're going to find that out. I'm watching that. And on the other side, I want to see Tommy DeVito, see if he can kind of hold down the fort and be a competent starter. He had, we've seen some decent play from Jalen Hyatt lately. We have. We're not going to get Darren Waller this week, but maybe next week we'll see what DeVito can do. But I want them to get some use out of Jalen Hyatt, because for some of these teams, we're starting our evals for next year. Yes, and we're going to see, are we taking a flyer on Jalen Hyatt, or is he a throwaway? Like, we're trying to figure that kind of stuff out.
I'll tell you what, this is that time of year that reminds me of Amon-Ra St. Brown. As a Lions fan, as a rookie, it was a very tough beginning of that year, right? And you remember that end of that rookie year, he exploded.
Crushed it,
and became a guy that it's like, we got to pay attention to him going into next year. That's exactly what we're trying to figure out. Rashee Rice kind of feels like he's doing that for us this year a little earlier than Amon-Ra did. A little bit of those vibes from me within that offense.
There's a lot of guys like that, actually, because Treylon Burks now, full game back. He was limited last week off the concussion. I want to see what to expect from him going forward. The young Packers wide receivers, Jaden Reed,
absolutely.
Romeo Dobbs. You also have Dontavian Wicks, who's a kind of a sneaky play this week. I think he was Adam Schefter's long shot. This week, he's a guy to watch without Christian Watson, and of course Jalen Hyatt for the Giants as well. So interesting. This is gonna be fun to watch those kind of young wide receivers in this game.
Yeah, I think that'll be very cool when you're watching this one. How are you going to watch it? You're going to do the Manning brothers side-by-side experience?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's how I'm doing it too.
Yeah, I'm doing, I want to see what that Manning cast red zone, if you will, looks like. So I love them guys. I think they do a great job analyzing the game as well. I'm learning stuff all the time because they just talk freely about and they just were playing not long ago. They just tell you all these things you never really think about. So no offense to Joe and Troy or elite as well, but just love mixing it up, and they do a great job. So.
I love the brotherly aspect of them. Not only being very smart football people, but watching them go back and forth at each other is just, it's fun, man.
Absolutely. It's so funny. Yeah. So they do a great job.
All right. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We'll be back tomorrow. Field Yates will hopefully join us. We'll find out. But for Mike, my name's Daniel. We love you guys. Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself. We will see you tomorrow. Good luck on Monday Night Football. Peace.